Welcome once again to our Live Better Connected series. And today we are going part of the Digital Leaders Week, which I'm really happy to say we're having a conversation around navigating the digital divide. Failing to plan, planning will fail. And today I've got some guests here, some very esteemed guests, but rather than me going through and telling you who they are, if I could ask each of you to say your name and your title. So we'll start off with Hamish.
Good morning, I'm Hamish McLeod. I'm the Chief Executive of Mobile UK.
And Councillor Mark Hawthorne.
Yes, I'm Councillor Mark Hawthorne and I'm the LGA Digital Champion.
John Gravett.
Hi Gareth, I'm John Gravett and I am the Managing Director of Cluttons.
And John Arnold.
John Arnold, I'm a Public Affairs Consultant.
And finally, Belinda.
Belinda Fawcett, General Counsel and Director of Property at Cornerstone Infrastructure.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, today, as I say, we're talking about connectivity and particularly about how we're getting it out there and how people use it. So I thought really the first thing we should do, Hamish, if I can direct this at you, is well, why is digital connectivity and particularly mobile connectivity so important?
Well, that's a very big question, but let me make a couple of points by way of response to that. First, more than 98% of us have a mobile device now. We're integrating mobile to more and more parts of our life. We are connecting more devices beyond just the smartphone, more than we probably realise. And specifically, 21% of us only use mobile to connect to the internet, particularly those that are least confident with technology. So it's very, very important from a digital inclusion point of view. Secondly, mobile connectivity enables economic activity across the economy and stimulates innovation amongst all sorts of businesses and services. So, for example, it helps people into the labour market and to work flexibly. So it's very important from an employment opportunities point of view. It helps small businesses find new customers and sells new customers. Mobile as an advertising platform is now much the largest, 4 times the size of television. And finally, it helps public authorities to deliver public services more effectively and efficiently. So, for example, looking to the future, helping local authorities to meet this huge challenge of dealing with it, discharging their adult and social care responsibilities and integrating better with the health service has been discussed recently.
Thank you, Hamish. We live in a hyper-connected world. I mean, you can't do anything now without being connected. I mean, even to the point that the mobile is almost secondary now to some of the devices we've got connecting, and it's what it can do. And I think, you mentioned their social service provision, you mentioned particularly councils, but we've got an expert here, Councillor Mark Hawthorne. What from a council perspective, again, it's changing the way we do things. What does it mean to councils?
It's hugely important to local authorities. I mean, Gloucestershire was part of the original pilot with Herefordshire all the way back in 2010. And the one thing that's not changed is demand for good connectivity, whether that's through mobile and broadband, has remained a constant through that period. But what has changed is the impetus and motivation actually to deliver improved connectivity and mobile connectivity as well. Back in 2010, people wanted to get onto Netflix. Now they want to get onto public services. Now they want to be able to connect to their local GP. Now they want to connect to the local council, whether to report a pothole or whether to interact with adult social care. That impetus was massively increased through COVID, where we went all online and we went massively digital. And so I think now really good connectivity for a locality is important for local businesses, but it's also important for the productivity of things like adult social care going forward. The baby boomers are about to be knocking on our door in the next 10 years. They're digi savvy and they're expecting a service that's online, and we need to be ready for it.
And just touching on that social provision, which is one of the biggest sort of social, sort of financial issues that the councils are facing at the moment. The big ability of connectivity is keeping people out of hospitals and safe at home. I mean, what do you see? How is that coming about?
It is a massive, massive impetus. At the moment, we know that adult social care is too heavily reliant on physical labour. It's massively reliant not just in the care home settings, but also keeping people in their own homes. We need to change that model. Otherwise, we're just not going to be able to provide those services for the people we know they're going to be demanding it within the next 5 or 10 years. And that answer has to be through digital connectivity. It's whether that's the smart home connectivity that helps monitor people in their own homes, which is where they want to live, by the way, or whether it's the connectivity into services like the NHS, which needs to be done in a digital platform, because we won't be able to manage the amount of demand over the next 10 years. And there's certainly not the labour force there to match the demand that's coming down with the baby boomers just around the corner.
Yeah, and the ability of mobile connectivity, particularly here, is social carers can actually spend more time with their patients. They don't have to go back and forth to hospital. They can have their notes on there, and on particularly, let's say, a connected tablet, which is connected to the cloud securely. And then equally, it's that mobility that really changes things.
And massively. I mean, we've seen it here in Gloucestershire in children's social care, and we're now starting to see it in adult social care as well. The ability to go and do a house visit and upload the notes in real time means you can do more visits. It means you don't have to make paper copies that you've then got to type up when you return to the office. That is a massive game changer. And I don't think anyone quite realises how much productivity gains are being made through the utilisation of mobile technology in places like adult social care and children's social services. But not only that, it improves the quality of the service that we are providing, because you're not creating handoffs and handovers, it's there in real time. So this is the future, and the more councils are starting to embrace it, the more they're seeing the potential for massive productivity gains.
And even in some of the mundane things that we do, like parking, you can use a mobile now instead of having to have cash or cards, which most people always have on them. And you can check, I always find I get caught out if I'm away and it's an hour. I'm like, what's the time I've got my ticket? I can't see it on the front of my car. Now I know I can go on a mobile and update it, and I'm less caught out.
I think also just on that, not only parking, but potholes. We launched Fix My Streets in Gloucestershire. It's reduced the number of calls we've had by 80%. 80% within 12 months, because you're providing an option that people actually want, and by providing an option people actually want, they stop using traditional services.
So this is a critical link between the citizen and the council, which is, I think, a vital part of democracy as well. But moving to John, you've done some research, John Gravitt, you've done some research into councils and particularly how they prioritise this. And we've heard that, this is important. It's transformational, both on social care and parking and potholes and lots more. I mean, we hear about digital transformation all the time. Where is that in terms of what are councils doing to move towards that? And are you seeing that on the ground in your research?
Gareth, thanks very much. What are we seeing? It's mixed messages. Obviously, some are very, very engaged, some are less so. But yes, our survey surveyed 500 local councillors, so we've got the information there. I'll caveat, it was done late last year, therefore we know there's been local elections since then, but we do feel the sentiment that we're hearing on the ground has remained very much the same. But in terms of priority, well, absolutely it's got to be a priority, and it should be a priority for local authorities. And when we did the survey, 71% agreed that the rollout of gigabit broadband and 5G to remain competitive was actually, a paramount. So that's a really high, strong percentage point. But one of the key issues that we were hearing is the stretch in local finances. So, the problem there we have is people want it, the local authorities want to engage, they want to invest, they want to try and invest in it to support their competitive advantage, but actually the stretch is too much. So I'll read a couple of responses. One respondent said the budget priority is providing the statutory basics. Telecoms are almost certainly important, but without extra funding, they are a low priority. That sums up one comment there. And the other one was, another said that the council funding is so problematic that good ideas like digital champions are shelved. So in essence, what we're seeing there, we know 71% they're really engaged and they want to do it, but funding seems to be a major problem or a blocker, and therefore, with the new government, it's going to be interesting there to see what Sir Keir Starmer and his administration, and with Sir Chris Bryant, what they're going to do in this area.
And we'll just come on to that in a second. But what I sort of find interesting there, and potentially, Mark, if you've got to come back to this, but is, this is clearly a priority, but the sort of blocker is funding. But in many ways, many would say that, this is an enabling technology. Actually investing in it will return much, much more. If you connect up a community, they can do much more with that connectivity than without that connectivity.
I mean, I think for me that the issue there is confidence. It's having the confidence that making the investment is going to make the return, both in the productivity of the local authority, but also in the benefits to local residents. I think the more we share case studies across the sector is really, really important. Many of the motivators, I think, remember the Children's Social Services journey for us here in Gloucestershire. Many of the motivations come from a not being in a good place and having to make that decision to improve and invest, and then seeing the benefits of that investment. But if you're stuck in a very difficult financial situation and you haven't got a good business case to make the investment, you're not going to make it. But if there's a strong evidence base that this is going to make a fundamental change and save your money, you're going to grab it with both hands.
Can I just pick up on that point? I think it's so well placed there, because our survey showed that 50% of local councillors sort of understood the benefits of 5G, which is good. But that does mean 4 out of 10 don't understand, which goes back to the point there that obviously we need to improve that sort of level of understanding. And when we interviewed the councillors, they said the decision makers understood the benefits, but 2 key things came out. 25% said they were equipped with the information to support raising awareness, and only 7% said they had the funding to do the raising awareness campaign. So absolutely right, increase the knowledge, increase the ability to share that information and the collateral to support education, and then a bit of funding to roll it out. And actually that really helps the business case. That really follows through.
I mean, I find that confidence point there really, really interesting. We have, over the years, we've had some issues around sort of confidence around the health side of things. We've had confidence around installation, which we will come on to later in this podcast. But when we've seen councils take a sort of leadership or take the plunge, one example I always like to sort of look back on is we had a primary school in rural Wales that set up a private 5G network. It was an immersive space, an education space. Once that was up and running, not only were the kids finding it amazing, being able to sort of touch things all on the road with around the room with this sort of augmented reality, but the teachers found they were upskilling themselves, learning new skills, and having a new way to teach their children. The parents thought it was fantastic because their children were coming home all animated about history or biology. But then even after that, this sort of 5G space is then being rented out to the community. And now you've got local businesses using it for a training session. So an example of where that sort of technology has come in, so a little bit of sort of hesitation at the beginning, but once it's in, it's become transformational. And you've got not only the school benefiting it, but the local community. I mean, Mark, I wondered if you've got sort of any thoughts on that as well, especially leadership side of things.
It is absolutely the leadership side of things. And I think it's having that confidence at an officer level and at a member level that these are the right decisions to be making. Because you only have to listen to local residents. We had a primary school that didn't have broadband. And, the amount of noise they were making about the fact that they didn't have that basic need was huge, because actually it is now seen as a basic requirement to be able to deliver education, teaching, to have good internet connectivity. During COVID lockdown, most pupils were being taught remotely. So there is an entire new generation of teachers coming through where they see this as being really, really important. But I keep going back to, part of the problem with councils is always about prioritisation. What do we prioritise? Unless you've got the clear evidence and business cases to give confidence to officers and to members that these are the right decisions to make, it's always a very difficult challenge to get these sorts of investments prioritised. But I think we're increasingly seeing it as an important way forward, especially when we look at the productivity challenge within government more generally.
I think, Gareth, can I just come in there? I think one of the important things is the councillors' awareness of what is required. And I think something that we're always trying to do is basically get the balance right between the impact on the environment, particularly in rural areas, and the benefits of the public benefits of connectivity. And we recently had, when trying to roll out SRN, some of the sort of planning consents, and particularly in areas of outstanding, natural beauty, where the local planners actually wanted to refuse it to preserve the scenic beauty. But the actual councillors got together, assessed the recommendations, and looked at what the positive impact on the residents and buildings, and said that the plans should be approved, because in their view, rural communities should receive the same benefits as urban communities. And I think this is, really a really critical point now, particularly in rural areas, that they need to sort of have the expectation they'll get the same service as the rest of the nation. But this is where I think the councillors, and that's actually at no cost to them, it's just really knowing and balancing out those benefits.
I think that's a really interesting point. It's almost the cost of not being connected, and we've seen in some areas that that not being connected, you start to lose your youth. You can't generate interest in bringing people in, investment and people. And I wonder, this is the whole debate about digital inclusion or exclusion, which is the more concerning part. Again, Mark, sorry to bring this back to you, but sort of I wonder if there is sometimes this view between physical and digital, and again going back to Belinda's point, the lack of sort of awareness around it. If we talked about getting a new bus stop into a local area, there would be very much high on the agenda. It connects people, it brings in investment, it allows people to have those opportunities that they wouldn't, the job opportunities, to get access to work. But what's really the difference between a bus stop these days and a digital connection?
No, and it is. This is again all about. There's a fantastic example in Gloucestershire. It doesn't put us in particularly good light, where we've just spent, I think, best part of £20 million building a brand spanking new park and ride centre just outside Cheltenham, opposite GCHQ, by the way. And it's all singing or dancing. It's the most wonderful thing you've ever seen. It's got 100 EV charging points. But as part of the process, the civil engineers and planners had to get a mobile phone mast moved, and they just sent the sort of 6-month statutory notice: you've got to move this. That's it, sod's law, nothing we can do about it. And just as they were about to open this marvellous new technical innovation in park and ride with, you can imagine this thing, it is wonderful. Come and visit it at some point. But the key thing was, they were opening it, and the only thing they were getting was massive complaints from local residents that their mobile phone connectivity had just gone down the toilet, and that they weren't able to connect. And when we went back and started asking questions, all the civil engineers were going, well, we followed due process. As far as we're concerned, we did our job, tick, box, move on. And I think for us as a council, that was the moment where we realised, actually, what we have is a missing piece of the jigsaw that needs to connect the economic side of the activity we do as a council, which is about promoting inward investment and digital connectivity, and the civil engineers who just clearly just saw it like another utility and had a very sort of bland relationship, not realising the impact of what they were doing.
But interestingly on that, though, Mark, the interesting is that you wouldn't build a building without water, electricity, gas, etc. We've got to have the mindset to include the connectivity piece. Otherwise, the building or the park and ride, however glorious it is, simply doesn't work, because if you get there and you can't be on your mobile device waiting for the bus, it doesn't work. But just one other sort of stat from the report, which also highlights this, is 68% of the councillors said that residents were wanting better connectivity, so that's fantastic. But then 27% of the residents would be in favour to support new infrastructure. So we've still got that. It goes back to the education piece. It goes back to the reasons why that we need to have the right level of education to support that connection of what you need the infrastructure to get the services that you need on the ground, that we all desperately want to have on the ground, especially when you say about the baby boomers entering the sort of adult space as it comes in the next 5-10 years' time.
But I wonder whether... I wonder whether... Is that because people don't really understand that what is required in order to get the connectivity? And, that actually, and everyone wants this and everyone moans when they don't get it, and you're trying to sort of follow ways or whatever it is, and then the coverage drops. But the reason is, in most instances, is because we can't get the infrastructure. And do you think there is a correlation between, the coverage dropping, that? Do people actually recognise that? Or is it, well, in order to get their mobile signal, they have to have infrastructure, and somebody has to have the infrastructure. We have to be able to put it somewhere, and that is really our problem.
Yeah, and that's the education piece that the market needs. It's we don't like the masks, but you want to use your mobile phone, or you want to use your tablets, you want everything else that you do. So yeah, it's that education piece which goes back to the beginning that is quite clearly laid out. Education supports the business cases, supports the understanding.
So all of you, I mean, I think this is where we bring John Arnold in here, because this is the mindset piece. We're clearly seeing here of the need for it. We're seeing councils saying they want it, but potentially there's a bit of a confidence issue. We've talked about leadership. So, we've just had a brand new government elected into Westminster. They have some really fascinating and want to move things quickly. They've got a focus on growth and investment. My question is, are they prioritising digital connectivity? And what are we seeing in the noises that are being put forward? John, please do give us your analysis as the public affairs professional in the room.
Yes, well, thank you. That's a big title. As I am from speaking to you this morning from Pret, I mean, other coffee shops are available. So I'm living the digital dream myself, working away from home. But I have one claim to fame, because I've been working in the mobile sector for 20 years. So I can remember when Hamish was actually young. And I think we've got to think as well a little bit from where we've come from. So in the last 20 odd years, and Hamish will back me up, I'm sure, we've run through, a campaign from a national party about monster mobile phone masts. I can remember speaking to, and this individual is still a member of Parliament, and briefing him, and he said, mobile phones are a fad, young man. They are a fad and they will not last. And I said, well, okay, and clearly we didn't make much progress, but he's still an MP. And another who was an advisor on business policy at a party conference, there was a full briefing on, how mobile operate, how the signals transferred to the mobile, etc., etc. And she said at the end of the briefing, well, why not just stick the masts in the sea? Then we'll have, it won't upset anybody. And we've come a long way. There's universal now political recognition that the mobile sector, that digital is crucial to the UK economy. And that brings us on to the new Labour government that's come into office. Of all the things they have prioritised, one is growth, two is productivity, and whichever way you want to sell it. Now, obviously, house building and development is fundamental to that, and it goes to my old economics teaching of Keynesian economics of shovels in the ground leads to a growth in the economy, and you can scratch around that, but that's fundamentally what it is. So over the next 5 years, there is going to be a lot of house building, there's going to be a lot of development, and there's a presumption to build now. So one of the biggest groupings, and I think we've got the Labour Party conference coming up next week, in fact. One of the biggest events there, I think, will be the YIMBY, something we've never heard of. Hamish and I have known NIMBYs for years and years and years. I mean, Hamish is only 32, and he's been aged by this process over the years. But the YIMBY group is, yes, in my backyard, and there's a whole host of new Labour MPs who are very, very positive about development. Now, the opportunity is immense for the mobile sector to piggyback on that development, because if you're building a vast number of houses up and down the country, you need to build the digital infrastructure as core in those master plans and in those developments. Otherwise, you'll have brand spanking new houses with all the great features, but you can't use your mobile phone. Therefore, you can't work from home and all those productivity gains that we see. So that is absolutely fundamental. And I raised the industrial strategy. This new Labour government have talked about an industrial strategy. Great. Well, we all want an industrial strategy, but there needs to be some meat on the bones. or to be honest, there needs to be a digital industrial strategy, because I always think we used to talk about the three key utilities as water, gas, and electricity. Now it is water, gas, electricity, and mobile telecoms. It is absolutely fundamental. 5G has changed that, and COVID has changed that in the recognition factor. So within that industrial strategy, and there's an onus on the industry to step up, and you've done really well from the Mobile Operators Association and the four operators to get the issues that you care about on the agenda. But now the opportunity is getting that mobile strategy into that overarching industrial strategy. And it's something that, and it can't be just a fad and words. It needs to be something that's there for the next 15, 20 years and is key to our productivity growth. So I think I've held court for long enough. I'll allow others to input.
So before others just jump in, hey, I'll bring Hamish in 1 second. But I suppose the question I've got is, you've said, that they clearly are we've seen step up from the industry. The government is looking for a digital industrial strategy. I mean, I suppose I would ask, what do we do to get that? Because at the moment, I think what I've seen from the government is a focus on data centers and housing particularly. And I think, as you said yourself, you can't build housing without it being connected these days. People don't want to move into areas that don't have connectivity. And that matters as well for the data centers. If you're going to put them in an area, it's going to be in a connected area. And I bring an example. The government put forward a sort of national 5G autonomous vehicle testing area in one town in the UK, which I won't mention. But what they found was, when they'd given the green light, unfortunately, they had forgotten to realise that there was any 5G in the area or not. So they had to hastily then work with the networks to sort of get one built up. So, John, what do you think on that point?
I think from that perspective, I think it's increasing that awareness of what needs to be deployed. So you look at planning applications, for example. People talk about placemaking. You're building new communities, 500 new houses, say. So we've got a very traditional planning system, and the new government are talking about changing the planning legislation. Really encouraged to hear that. But if you're going to build the volume of houses, for example, and the speed they want to do it over the next 4 to 5 years, they need to be really quick on changing the legislation to make sure that, for example, placemaking. So when you think about a village or a new town or a new housing development, you want the right connections, be that transport, be that connectivity, be that how you get the social interaction, the social care, schooling, etc. And guess what? Connectivity now has to thread into all of that and be part of that. But if you talk to most of my mainstream property colleagues talking about planning and placemaking, guess what? Connectivity doesn't really still fall on the radar that significantly. So again, it's just improving how we develop things, how the central government and local government work together to change some of those policies, thoughts, and weave into the fabric how important connectivity is for everything else to flow off. So I do really see a role for central and local government to work very closely driving that change, because they do own the policy and the structure behind which we roll out equipment or roll out housing, schooling, etc.
And Mark, sort of, we brought the local government side of that in there in terms of pushing along or bringing along the new government. What your view there?
Well, no one can doubt the ambition is there, but I think part of the problem is that a lot of the dots haven't been joined up yet. And at the moment, what we have is the announcement about increased housing numbers, which are basically just being dumped on districts. And most districts were struggling with their existing 5-year land supply issues in the first place. We do need a return to strategic planning, which has been muted and promised, but the detail of that has yet to be delivered. When I was first elected, way back in the dim and distant past, we used to have strategic infrastructure development plans that sat along strategy plans, which actually defined the infrastructure and how it was going to be delivered and identified the gaps in funding. None of that exists anymore. So we do need to join those gaps up. and join those dots together. The other problem you're going to have is, I think there's a lack of skills within local government to deliver some of this stuff. So all the big strategic planners that existed back in the noughties and up to about 2010, when strategic planning was scrapped, have all disappeared, and no one has followed in their steps. So there is going to be a real skills gap within local government when they're challenged to deliver. I think the ambition is absolutely right. I think connecting industrial strategies with strategic planning, with housing targets, absolutely makes sense. But there is a problem, I think, when we get to the detail, that there is a skills gap, and some of the policy decisions haven't quite been lined up yet.
Yeah, I think I suppose taking it back to government, and at Connected Britain last week, Chris Bryant gave a keynote speech about obviously the support the government wanted to give to digital, to mobile, and sort of saying, well, we need your help to support this. But I'm not convinced that the government really understand the importance of the digital infrastructure to actually support the data centres, the housing, and all the other sort of what they are calling critical infrastructure. And unless they get that, we're not going to achieve what they want to achieve. Digital infrastructure, the mobile side, needs to be considered as really critical to this economic development. And the infrastructure side tends to get forgotten. And I was sort of looking around Connected Britain, and there's all this amazing, great ideas. There's the AI, there's all the stuff, the innovation. The government sort of invests in 5G innovation and trials, but none of this is going to work unless we can get the infrastructure. And if you look at the NPPF consultation, again, there's very little reference to mobile infrastructure. Yes, it is all to data centres and these gigafactories and all these sort of laboratories and all this sort of stuff. But I think government, and if they're listening to this, have to sort of go right back to the basics. We need to get that infrastructure in place.
Yeah, it's interesting on that Connected Britain. There was that sense of investment going to R&D, and it goes back to the business case solution. It's probably a bit easier putting money into R&D because you can then quantify the outputs, put some SLAs on it, measure the outputs, measure what progress has been made with R&D. When I think they're a bit more nervous of how they approach that with actually deploying physical infrastructure, even though you could easily measure the success of the rollout of it. But one little note I would say from the research, that we obviously interviewed 100 MPs. Of those that were Labour, 89% of them said they think digital champions should be funded by central government. So I know there's been a big change in the number of Labour MPs now post that survey, but I'm intrigued to see if that will still ring true. Nice little nugget there, but hopefully that will be the case.
And I'd certainly like to touch on digital champions. It's something Mobile UK and others do support. But whilst we're talking about the infrastructure, Belinda, I thought this was a perfect chance to bring you in as well. You represent not only Cornerstone, but you are the chair of the Mobile Infrastructure Forum. And if we're looking at how this is all built and that physical infrastructure out there, I think a lot of people think it's all the mobile network operators. Now, I wondered if you might shed a light on the world that is actually how this is put and installed across the country.
Yeah, so the digital infrastructure, so we basically put up the passive infrastructure, so it's the masts that you see across the country, and then the mobile operators come along and actually put on the active equipment to actually provide the mobile signal. So there are sort of, I suppose, four key mobile infrastructure businesses, and that they are the participants of the Mobile Infrastructure Forum. That's ourselves, Cornerstone, the Cellnex, MBNL, and Wireless Infrastructure Forum, and Wireless Infrastructure Group. Sorry, and I think what we're there to do is to try and support the delivery of what we consider world-class mobile infrastructure, because without that we can't improve that wireless connectivity for both society and businesses throughout the UK. So what we want to do is very much engage with government, and it's not just the MNOs, it's not just the mobile operators who need to do that. The government needs to engage with us, get our views on how we actually get this infrastructure up, and that is the starting point to all this. We're the ones who actually get the planning approvals. We're the ones who do the agreements with the site providers. And I think it's really critical that the government listen to the Mobile Infrastructure Forum in terms of sort of how they take this forward. So yes, I think there are a lot of focus areas that we're looking at. Planning is definitely one of those. Legislation, there's the implementation of the PSTI Act, which Chris Bryant did say was going to be fully implemented. In other areas, we're very keen, as I think we all are on this podcast, that working with local authorities and getting digital champions. I think, I refer back then to the Clutton's report. Those digital champions are seen as real enablers of digital connectivity, because they are the starting point, I think, of this whole education and awareness. So, that's sort of from the Mobile Infrastructure Forum and what we're aiming to do.
And John, this does bring in the digital champions. As I said, the Mobile Infrastructure Forum, Mobile UK, even, and the LGA too. We are very all putting forward that digital champions could be a real big piece of this puzzle. In one, building awareness, improving the interoperability between local authorities and councils as a sort of single point of contact, and bringing together actually internally local councils. I think, just as I put a hand up here, I was a councillor myself. I was a cabinet member of digital technology, yet trying to get the planning department to talk to the estates department, or the estates department to talk to the leadership, and then getting a sort of a position on it seemed like a sort of jumbled mess. But equally, if it's a jumbled mess internally, then externally, who do we talk to as an industry? And that's why I think we've sort of come across digital champions being important. So John, I just, in your research, where is that, what's happening on that front?
Yeah, well, I think I've given the sort of responses there, that the fact that obviously we need to improve the understanding of digital connectivity, and therefore digital champions have a great role to play in that. So, let's put it into context. It's not the silver bullet having digital champions. It's not just the one sole thing, but as the first major pillar in change, we really need to get them, get more of them, and to make sure they're embedded and they've got that greater accountability. To roll out infrastructure, you need central government with their targets, policies, funding. You need local authorities with the planning, with permits, with the whole range of activities that they play in the role, and then you've got the network providers as well as then local businesses. And the digital champions have quite an important role to try and blend all of that ecosystem locally together to try and make it happen. One thing we do and was quite apparent is there was quite a lot of the pure focus seems to be 100% about digital inclusivity is their role. Absolutely agree. Digital inclusivity is so important, but it has to remain at a strategic level so they can actually do that, rather than implementing very small micro elements like making sure a local new business is getting laptops or is getting a connectivity into a shop. They need to try and make sure that level at the moment remains high level strategy to make sure that is deployed across their local area. So again, because no doubt of the funding issues, they end up doing multiple work streams, and we need to try and limit that so they are really focused on rolling out the infrastructure.
And you talk about digital inclusivity being sort of the main focus, and Mark, I might bring you back on this, and John, if you've got conversation yourself you want to bring in. But, you can't have digital inclusion if you don't have the infrastructure in place. And we've still got this chicken and egg situation. We want digital transformation, we want digital inclusivity. Yet when it comes to a planning application, the default position of a councillor will be, I'm going to support those that have made the noise. And those that made the noise don't tend to be the ones that want that infrastructure. And if you look at how many letters that come in, it's normally a very small amount, or even on one or two people. Yet they tend to have the voice for the vast majority. So I suppose the question there is, do we need to see more leadership from a council to sort of bring towards the benefits? And equally, is the planning system weighted in the right way, that it is providing such a strong, we've spoken here about it being almost a utility. Is it weighted towards the social and economic goods, or someone who can write a letter because they don't like the look of something?
So I'll come back onto that one in a second, if I may. The bit on digital champions, I think, is really, really important. And Belinda, I think you challenged me many aeons ago, but if this is important, Mark, why aren't you doing it? Well, I've got some good news. We actually are doing it in Gloucestershire, and that's because our BT contract wasn't a BD UK contract. So the clawback we can spend in a very different way than the BDUK contract specifies. So we've got 2 years worth of funding now from BT Clawback, and we're employing 2 people. We're employing a digital champion for the economy and planning side, and that's very much about trying to avoid our little problem we had with our exciting new park and ride, but also about creating that digital infrastructure plan for Gloucestershire and how we can promote ourselves as a great place for you guys to come and invest. And then the second digital champion, which is a entirely different post, but within the same team, is around digital and inclusion. And part of actually that post has been easier to fund because we've had partners like the NHS that have been willing to put money into that because they can see the benefits of supporting hard to reach groups or vulnerable groups in upskilling on the digital inclusion agenda, and they see it as part and parcel of that digital NHS approach as well. So those are the 2 things we've done in Gloucestershire, but we were slightly unique in the way that we could use our clawback. But the benefits are huge. I think we see this as a really important investment. On the planning side, look, you're never going to get local councils to agree to, I think, some of the demands that have been made by the sector. We think planning is a very important part of the democratic process. I know that utility companies, including mobile, would like to see more permissive developments. I don't think we as a sector would ever actually agree to that as a matter of principle. But what we do recognise is that sometimes we need to be making sure we're listening to the wider voices within communities, and that includes listening to business voices, community voices that are out there demanding this connectivity, and we need to get better at that. And I think where we see councils failing to deliver on planning applications because they're listening to the NIMBYs. And look, I get emails into my inbox every single time someone puts a mask up from somebody who believes that 5G is part of some sort of national World Economic Forum conspiracy process to take over our brains. You've got to put those to a side and listen to the broader community voices. And I think part of what we're hoping by having a digital champion is that will be a voice we can more readily input into the planning process.
Brilliant. And Belinda, you've made a big point throughout this of awareness and education, and as an industry with Mobile UK and Mobile Infrastructure Forum, there are awareness campaigns out there: 5G, check the facts, live better connected, and building mobile Britain. I mean, what weight do you put on those as well? Because there is a role for industry as well here.
Absolutely. There is a role. I think we do a huge amount, and I think, between Mobile UK and the Mobile Infrastructure Forum, there is a lot of campaigning, but are we really reaching the people we need to reach? So my view is that we need a broader campaign. John's great report, etc. But is it really reaching the residents and the constituents within all the local authorities, and I'm not sure it is, and that's where I think the government needs to take a bit more responsibility for this. And we have one London borough which will remain nameless, but which is actually quite one of the sort of least wealthy London boroughs. We cannot get any mobile infrastructure installed in that London borough, and for the life of me, I cannot understand why, because of the economic and social benefits that this will bring. And I do wonder, taking Mark's point actually, which I think is really valid, the people who object to it, but are they really talking to the majority of the citizens and the people there? If they knew that they could get great 5G, great 4G, work more from home, get all the benefits, the social care in this deprived area, it makes no sense to me. But I think, Mark, what you said was so right. It's the people who are objecting, the 5 people who don't want the mast, but the people who really do don't ever get a say in this. And I don't know how we can get that through, but I really think that's something that the industry needs to work on. How can we get that over the line? Listen to the people and find out what they actually want.
Now, I'd like to put that question out to our other guests, and just to sort of come back on a quick point there with Belinda saying, I mean, Belinda, Cornerstone were recently at Connected Britain, and one of the things we found as Mobile UK is perceptions of the infrastructure are often quite out of what they are. So people think there's sort of these huge poles, electricity poles going across the countryside, when actually they're quite sleek monopoles built to design and fit in with the street furniture. But you actually had a full mast constructed at there, which would have taken people around to see what it was and talk about it and understand it. I thought it was great. So I hope we can see that going out a bit more in the country to sort of look at. But again, out to the sort of there, what do we do to change these perceptions to other panelists here? How do we do that? Because it is a almost a critical need now. This digital inclusion point, being able to get access to your health records, speak to your GP. We're hearing many occasions now that you're sort of refused actually to see a physical meeting until you've had that sort of meeting on your phone. I'd just like to put that out there. Anyone?
I don't mind going. My view, first two steps, if I was in the shoes of the new administration, first 12 months is what small but adequate funding can you put in to support the greater digital champions? How can you do some media campaigns to highlight what digital inclusivity and digital Britain would generate in future revenue for UK PLC? And then finally, just a last bit about making sure that people are aware of the educational piece around infrastructure. So I think just doing that in the short term and redirecting some of the finance to the practicalities rather than R&D would be a really good solution.
Mark or John?
Well, I mean, I'm going to use a slight aside anecdote. So I had 10 years of pain trying to deliver an energy from waste plant in Gloucestershire, and it faced many of the same issues and concerns, which was you had a very loud, vocal, NIMBY voice that didn't want to see this happen. And we spent an inordinate amount of time communicating out the benefits of why this was important for Gloucestershire and the benefits for the wider local economy and community. And what we found was the silent majority were very much supportive and in favour when they were presented with some basic facts about why this was important. But it takes effort to do that. The easy option, I think, for councillors and politicians is quite often just to listen to that very loud minority voice and assume that is the voice that's speaking for everyone. But actually, there is real benefit of going out there and listening to that broader voice. And I think that the importance of digital champions is about making that connection back into localities, about making the case back into localities of why this infrastructure investment is important. When local government was responsible for rolling out the first part of BDUK's broadband connectivity projects, we took a very front role in promoting the importance of broadband within our rural communities because it was our money on the line, and we felt there was a real benefit of delivering those messages. We need to get back into that space where we're talking about the much broader digital infrastructure, working with industry, and then selling back as part of, in the same way we sell, why we need, a new junction off the motorway or a new bypass. This should be part and parcel of what we're selling back into our communities.
I mean, look, everyone, I've had a fantastic discussion today. I think it's been really, really interesting. Thank you to our panellists, John, Mark, John, and Belinda and Hamish. If you have enjoyed this, please do subscribe and to both our channels and the podcast. This is part of the Digital Leaders Week series. It will be going out during that weekend. I really hope you all listen, and please do share and say click that like button as well. So thank you very much. Thank you all.